Chapter 1. The $35 Dream. The saloon smelled of whiskey and wood smoke, its air thick with the laughter of men who had already lost too much to care. Boots scraped against warped planks. Spurs jingled sharp as coins, and the piano banged out a tune no one really listened to. Jack Holloway sat at the far table, hat tilted low, nursing the last of his coffee. $35, the ranch broker crowed, slapping the yellow deed onto the table for all to see. That's all it took for Holloway here to buy himself a patch of land no sane man wants. The room broke into snickers and jeers. A cowboy with a crooked grin raised his glass. Hope you got a strong back, Holloway. That land's cursed. Ain't nobody lasted there longer than a season. Jack didn't rise to the bait. He tipped back his cup, the bitter dregs burning his throat, then stood. His shadow stretched tall in the lamplight, and the chatter dipped into silence for a breath. Land's land, he said evenly. A man either makes something of it, or he dies trying. He left their laughter behind him, stepping into the cool dusk where the horizon bled orange into purple. His horse, Dusty, nickered softly, as if asking if they were really going through with this. Jack patted the gelding's neck. Yeah, boy, $35. Might be the last gamble I got. The ride out was long, the prairies stretching endless and lonesome. Coyotes yipped in the distance, and the wind carried the dry scent of sagebrush and dust. By the time Jack reached the crooked fence line of his new home, the moon had risen pale and cold over the hills. The ranch was little more than a skeleton of dreams. Broken posts, a sagging roof, and silence thick enough to press against a man's chest. Jack dismounted, boots crunching in the dirt. He lit a lantern and pushed open the barn door. Hinges screamed in protest, echoing through the hollow space. Dust hung in the air like ghosts stirred from slumber. Then he froze. Shapes swayed from the rafters, caught in the weak lantern light. For one terrible instant his gut turned to stone, thinking he'd bought a graveyard. But as he drew closer, the truth cut deeper. 3 young women hung bound by their wrists, their bare feet just brushing the hay-strewn floor. Their dark hair framed bruised faces, eyes wide with fear and life. One of them moaned faintly, her voice cracked but desperate. Jack's lantern shook in his hand. He tore his knife free, cutting to the first set of ropes, catching her as she fell limp into his arms. Easy now, he murmured, heart pounding harder than any gunfight he'd ever stood in. You're safe, you're safe. The words felt fragile in the silence, like promises the West itself might try to break. But Jack knew one thing clear as the starlight overhead. This land was no longer just about him. It had already chosen its reckoning. Chapter 2. Guns, Whiskey, and Whispers. Jack led the last of the Apache girls down on the barn's straw-strewn floor, his chest heaving from the effort. Their wrists were raw from rope, their lips cracked from thirst. They watched him warily, their silence heavier than the desert night itself. The eldest, with storm-dark eyes, pulled her sisters close, shielding them even as her body trembled. Jack lifted his palms slowly, as though he stood before a skittish mare. Ain't gonna hurt you, he said, voice low, gravelly. You got my word. No reply came, only a flicker of distrust in the woman's gaze. Jack knew better than to push. Trust out here wasn't given, it was earned, and sometimes it cost blood. By morning, the town already knew. The saloon doors banged open as Jack strode in, dust clinging to his coat. Sunlight cut slats across the smoke-hazed room. Men glanced up from their cards. Whiskey glasses paused in midair. A ranch hand near the bar smirked. Word is Holloway's house ain't so empty anymore. The man drawled. Heard tell of 3 squaws hangin' around his barn. That true. A ripple of crude laughter spread, but Jack didn't flinch. He ordered whiskey, tossed a coin on the counter, and let the burn roll down his throat before answering. They ain't hangin' any more. he said flatly. The room quieted. Some men shifted in their chairs, uneasy. Others narrowed their eyes, suspicion thickening like smoke. A gambler with silver buttons on his vest leaned back in his chair. Careful, cowboy. Strays like that bring trouble. Folks be wanting what you got. Jack met his gaze, hand resting lightly on the butt of his revolver. Then let him try. The piano player missed a note, and the silence rang louder than any gunshot. Finally, a laugh cut through, forced, nervous, and the saloon's chatter rose again, though quieter now, like men muttering about a storm on the horizon. Jack finished his drink and left. Outside, the sun was sliding toward the mountains, painting the sky in blood and fire. His boots crunched down the boardwalk, every step dogged by whispers following him like shadows. Back at the ranch, the girl sat by the hearth he'd lit inside the half-collapsed house. The youngest clutched a blanket around her shoulders, eyes darting at every creak of the wind. The middle sister, her hair tangled but her chin high, studied him with something between suspicion and curiosity. Jack crouched by the fire, pulling off his gloves. "Town knows you're here," he said quietly. "Some men will come sniffing. You don't trust me, I get that. But if you stay, I'll fight to keep you safe. That's all I can offer." The eldest's eyes narrowed, but a flicker of something else passed across her face. Something like reluctant recognition. She said nothing. Jack leaned back, the firelight painting his worn features in amber glow. Outside, coyotes cried across the prairie, and the night seemed to press close against the thin walls. He realized then that his $35 gamble had already turned into a war he couldn't walk away from. Chapter 3, Fires in the Canyon. The days that followed bled together in a haze of smoke and silence. Jack worked the ranch by day, mending fences that sagged like tired shoulders, while the three Apache sisters lingered close to the house, never straying far. Their words came rarely, hushed in a tongue Jack didn't know. Yet in their eyes, especially the eldest, he saw stories darker than midnight. It was on the third night, with stars spilling across the velvet sky, that they began to speak. They sat around a small fire in the canyon behind the ranch, its flames licking upward, casting shadows along the rock walls. The youngest, Tala, clutched a strip of jerky Jack had given her, nibbling like a frightened sparrow. The middle sister, Nijoni, stared into the fire, her lips pressed tight. The eldest finally lifted her gaze to Jack. Her voice was hoarse, accented, yet steady. "Soldiers burned our village," she said, each word carrying the weight of ash. "We searched for kin. Men on horses found us first." Jack's hand tightened around the tin cup in his grip. He didn't speak right away, knowing anything he said might sound hollow. Instead, he set the cup down and looked straight at her. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "No one should have to carry that kind of loss." Ayoka, that was her name. He learned then, watched him, her dark eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Why help us?" she asked. "You gain nothing. You lose much." Jack smirked faintly, though it didn't touch his eyes. He tossed a twig into the fire, sparks flying up like tiny stars. "Maybe a man gets tired of watching wrongs pile up. Maybe I bought this land hoping for a fresh start. Didn't figure that meant letting 3 lives slip away." Silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of firewood and the distant cry of coyotes. The sisters exchanged a glance, a silent language between them. Nijoni finally spoke, her voice softer than her sister's. "If we stay, men will come. They will take us or kill you." Jack leaned back against the rock, crossing his arms. "Then let him come." Ayoka studied him for a long moment. Firelight danced across her face, softening the hard lines carved by fear. Her lips parted as though she wanted to argue, but instead, she looked away, pulling her blanket tighter. The canyon felt different then, not just a hollow of stone and fire, but a place where something unspoken stirred. As the flames burned low, Jack caught Ayoka's eyes once more. For the first time, he didn't just see defiance. He saw a glimmer, fragile, fleeting, of trust. It struck him harder than any bullet ever could. Chapter 4. A Cowboy Stand. The day broke dry and sharp, the kind of morning where the wind cut through a man's coat like a knife. Jack was fixing a broken gatepost when Dusty's ears flicked back, his nostrils flaring. Jack straightened, hand going to the Colt on his hip, before he even heard the sound. Hoofbeats, hard and fast, rolling across the prairie like thunder. The sisters had gathered water near the creek, but Ayoka was the first to notice. She came running, skirts brushing against the dust, her voice tight. Riders, 5, maybe more. Jack cursed under his breath. He knew it before she even spoke. The bounty hunters had come back. They crested the ridge in a spray of dirt, sun glinting off rifles and cruel grins. Their leader, a scar-faced man with a red bandana knotted around his neck, reined in his horse at the fence line. "Morning, Holloway," the man called, his voice carrying easy as laughter. "We come for what's ours. Hand over the squaws, and maybe you keep that pretty little ranch of yours." Jack's jaw worked as he slid the gate closed behind him. He rested one hand casually on the post, the other never far from his revolver. "They ain't yours," he said, voice steady. "They're under my roof now." A murmur of amusement rippled through the hunters. Scarface leaned forward in the saddle. "You think you can stand against us?" One man with a $35 ranch. Jack's gaze flicked past him, catching Ayoka's eyes where she stood at the porch. She was holding her sisters behind her, chin high, fierce as the desert sun. That was answer enough. "I reckon I can try," Jack said. The first shot cracked the silence wide open. Jack ducked for cover behind the corral, his Colt barking back with fire and smoke. Wood splintered as bullets slammed into the fence, Dusty rearing and screaming. The air filled with the smell of powder and the roar of gunfire. Then, something Jack hadn't expected. Nijoni darted from the porch, loosing an arrow from a bough Jack hadn't even seen her carve. It struck a rider's arm, spinning him from the saddle. Tala hurled a rock that cracked against another man's skull, sending him sprawling. And Ayoka, she had taken Jack's spare rifle from the wall and stood on the porch like she had been born for it. Each shot she fired was measured, her dark eyes blazing with defiance. Jack grinned through the smoke, blood seeping from a graze along his shoulder. "Good girls," he muttered, snapping another round into the Colt. The hunters faltered, their easy confidence burning away under the fury of cowboy and sisters alike. Scarface snarled, wheeled his horse, and called for retreat. Within moments, they were gone, their hoofbeats fading into the distance. The ranch was left in silence, broken fences and scattered brass shining in the dirt. Jack leaned against the post, panting, his arm bleeding freely. Ayoka approached, rifle still in hand, her breath coming hard. She met his gaze, eyes unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded. For the first time, it wasn't mistrust that passed between them, but something closer to respect. Chapter 5. The Choice of the Heart. The ranch lay quiet after the battle, but the silence was uneasy, like the land itself was holding its breath. The fences were broken. The air still carried the bitter smell of gunpowder, and blood stained the dust where men had fallen. Jack sat on the porch steps, arm wrapped in a strip of cloth Ayoka had tied tight around the wound. Each time the wind shifted, the fabric tugged, reminding him she'd touched him. Steady hands, no hesitation. The sisters moved about the yard, gathering scattered tools, whispering in their own tongue. They were no longer the frightened, broken figures he found hanging from the rafters. Fire had sparked in them now, and Jack had seen it burn bright in the fight. As dusk sank into the valley, the sky painted in bruised purples and gold, Ayoka came to sit near him. She didn't look at him at first. Instead, she watched the horizon where the last light bled away. "You are a fool," she said at last, voice low but steady. "One man against many. You risked your life for us." Jack let out a tired laugh, adjusting his hat back from his brow. "I've been called worse. Besides, didn't figure I was standing alone out there. You held your own." Her eyes flicked him then, sharp, assessing. "We could leave. Tonight. Disappear into the hills before more men come." The words hit him harder than any bullet. Jack looked down at his hands, rough and scarred, resting on his knees. He thought of the long rides across empty land, of fixing fences for no one but himself, of whiskey in saloons that offered company but never belonging. Then he thought of this porch, with firelight glowing behind him and 3 voices murmuring inside the house. He shook his head. "This place, it ain't much. $35 and a heap of trouble, but it's more than I ever had. And it ain't a home if it's empty." Ayoka studied him in the fading light, her expression caught between defiance and something softer. "You speak as though we are part of this home." Jack turned, meeting her gaze full on. "You are. Leastways, I'd be honored if you'd stay. Not as captives, not as debts I owe, but as partners." The silence stretched, broken only by the whispered coyotes crying to the moon. Ayoka's hand tightened on the edge of her blanket. Slowly, she reached out, her fingers brushing against his wrist, a touch so slight it could have been the wind. Her voice was quiet, almost a confession. Sometimes the heart chooses before the mind is ready. Jack swallowed hard, his throat dry. The West was still dangerous, tomorrow uncertain. But in that moment, under the rising stars, he knew the gamble he'd made wasn't $35. It was something far greater. And for the first time, it felt like he'd won. Chapter 6, The Ranch Reborn. The weeks that followed carried the rhythm of hard work and slow healing. The ranch, once a hollow shell of broken board and silence, began to breathe again. Smoke curled steady from the chimney each morning. Horses snored in the corral Jack had mended plank by plank, and laughter, soft at first, then freer, echoed from the porch where the sisters sat in the evening sun. Jack rose with the dawn, sweat soaking his shirt as he worked the land. But he wasn't alone anymore. Tala darted through the fields, chasing chickens and bringing back wildflowers to tuck into her braids. Nijoni proved sharp-eyed with the cattle, her calm hand steadying calves that fought the rope. And Ayoka, she carried herself with quiet authority, helping mend fences, drawing water, and keeping her sisters safe with a watchful eye that never softened, except sometimes when she looked at Jack. The townsfolk still muttered. In the saloon, whispers followed him like smoke. Some called him a fool. Others swore he'd lose the ranch to the next wave of gunmen. But no one laughed in his face anymore. The gunfight had changed that. The man who stood against bounty hunters with 3 Apache women at his side had earned a wary respect, whether they admitted it or not. One evening, as the sky burned red over the horizon, Jack leaned on the porch rail, rolling a cigarette between his fingers. Ayoka joined him, her blanket draped over her shoulders, her hair loose in the evening wind. For a long time, they watched the land in silence, the wide prairie stretching endless and wild, coyotes singing to the rising moon. "You've given much," she said at last, her voice quiet but sure. "Your land, your blood, your place among your people. Why?" Jack lit the cigarette, exhaled smoke into the fading light. "Because I was tired of living for myself. $35 bought me dirt and broken boards. But when I found you here, it gave me something worth keeping up." He looked at her then, his eyes steady. A man don't walk away from that. Her gaze lingered on him, unreadable. Then, with a small breath, she reached out and laid her hand over his, strong, warm, grounding. "Then we stay, not as shadows, not as burdens, but as part of this place, as part of you. The door creaked open behind them, and Tala's laughter spilled out as she tugged Nijoni toward the supper fire. The air smelled of stew, wood smoke, and something like peace. Jack pulled Ayoka closer, his arms slipping around her shoulders as she let herself lean against him. Together they looked out at the land, their land now, where hope had taken root in dust and danger. The West was still wild, still cruel, but Jack knew one truth with the certainty of a sunrise. He hadn't just bought a ranch. He'd found a family. The sun was sinking low, pouring molten gold across the endless plains. Jack stood at the fence line, hat in hand, the breeze carrying the dry scent of sagebrush and the faint, drifting notes of a fiddle from the distant saloon. His land stretched before him, mended fences, smoke rising from the chimney, horses running free. It wasn't much, but it was alive again. Behind him, soft footsteps pressed against the dust. Ayoka came to his side, her blanket brushing against his arm. She looked out over the prairie, her dark eyes reflecting the fire of the dying sun. For a long moment, they said nothing. The land spoke for them, the whisper wind, the echo of coyotes calling to the night. Finally, she turned to him, her voice low but steady. You gave us more than shelter. You gave us a home. Jack swallowed, the weight of her words pressing heavier than any saddle. He reached for her hand, callous fingers closing around hers. Truth is, Ayoka, you gave me the same. Guess a man don't own land. Not really. But he can belong to it, same way he belongs to someone. Her lips curved into a faint, rare smile. She leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder as the last light bled across the horizon. Together, they stood, cowboy and warrior woman, survivors and partners, watching the west swallow the sun. And for the first time, Jack knew his $35 dream had bought him something beyond gold. It had bought him forever.